Good morning again, everybody. So today we are continuing our preparation for Easter, and we're looking at the story of the Lord's anointing, which happens just before his arrival into Jerusalem. So the subject we're going to be looking at today is the difficulty of making decisions in life. What really matters when we live our life? What is it that we should be focusing on? We can think about any decision in our life and realize there's different ways of approaching a decision, and what am I going to focus on, or what is valuable to me, and according to what I value is the way in which I will go. So we think about some difficult decisions that we might make in life. Is we have something sensitive that we need to bring to someone else's attention. Maybe it's within our own family, maybe it's in a friendship, maybe it's within a workplace. And the decision will be, well, how do I do that? Am I going to do it in a blunt, straightforward way? Is that what I need to do? Or do I need to do it in a more gentle way? Which is the right way of going about it? There's a decision there, a hard decision. Another decision might be with regards to work. For those who are looking towards work, or maybe are in work and maybe looking to change jobs, what job do I choose? Maybe an opportunity arises where I can take a job that's going to lift me up the ranks and allow me to influence more people. Maybe there's a pay rise in it. Or perhaps I stay on the level that I'm at and have more influence and more time within my family. Which way do I go? What is important? What matters to me? And what matters will then determine how we go about doing the things that we do. And it will bring a certain quality to what we are doing. Our story today that we read to the kids, and I'll read it again today, is the Lord pointing out to us that there are things that seem to matter, and there are things that really matter. And he draws our attention to it in this interesting story, an interesting reaction of his disciples and his interaction with them. So let me read it again, reading from Matthew 26. And when Jesus was in Bethany at the house of Simon the leper, a woman came to him having an alabaster flask of very costly, fragrant oil, and she poured it on his head as he sat at the table. But when the disciples saw it, they were indignant, saying, "Why this waste? For this fragrant oil might have been sold for much and given to the poor." But when Jesus was aware of it, he said to them, "Why do you trouble the woman? For she has done a good work to me. For you have the poor with you always, but me you do not have always. For in pouring this fragrant oil on my body, she did it for my burial. Assuredly, I say to you, wherever this gospel is preached in the whole world, what this woman has done will also be told as a memorial to her." Were the disciples wrong? Were the disciples wrong in wanting to take this costly oil and use it to help the poor? Isn't that what the Lord teaches? Isn't that what he has been trying to get the disciples to engage in and think differently about, is helping the poor, helping the needy? That's what the Lord is teaching. So why is the Lord a little upset or contrary to what the disciples are trying to do? What is the problem with what they have done? We have a tendency to think about works as a primary thing of our faith. But are we called to do something even more important? Is there something that the Lord is pointing to in this story that highlights that while there are things we do outwardly, there are things that are more important to us. Perhaps you've heard the phrase, actions precede and willing follows. That might be familiar to you, it might not, but if you've heard that phrase, then perhaps you've interpreted in the way of my actions matter, and I need to put effort into my actions, and I need to develop habits in helping other people and giving to the poor and trying to do my best, even if I don't like it, even if it's difficult, even if I don't have a love for it, just practice doing it. And if I practice and develop a habit for it, I'll at some point get a love for it. That's kind of how we generally interpret that idea. But that's not quite true. It appears to be true, but it's not. If we think about that idea of the oil and the vase being what is of the Lord, His love and His wisdom, His life, and we think of that oil pouring down, that's the direction that life flows from the Lord. From the Lord, through our soul, through our minds, down into our body. We tend to want to think about our faith, though, from the bottom up. That, well, if I just practice doing these things and I develop a habit for it, I will develop then a love for other people. I will develop a love for the Lord, and life then seems to flow upwards. But that's not the case. The spiritual principle is that the Lord's life flows down. If we channel our energy and our efforts into the physical things alone, what we're saying is that the works are what matter. Well, if I develop a love, if I develop a habit in this is what spiritual life is. And then we build our spiritual life on actions. And we then think, well, I need to then earn my way. Have I done enough actions? Have I been a good enough person? Works alone or actions alone don't get us into love. Actions alone don't bring us into a state of love or a state of heaven. There's something more. There's something deeper that the Lord is pointing out to us in the story. The disciples were in that thinking of, well, the works matter. That's what's important. But no amount of doing changes our hearts. And so the Lord, through the story, is trying to break down the appearance in us that the works are what matter. He's trying to show us that there's something more to our actions than what first appears. The disciples' approach was an intellectual approach. That's where we all begin our journey with the Lord, is through an intellectual approach. We're going to His Word and we're learning ideas from Him, and then we're trying to do them in practical, physical ways to others around us. That's where our journey begins. It's very intellectual, but it has its downfalls. Right? We start to measure ourselves by either our intellect, or we start to measure ourselves by the things that we're doing. And that becomes the measure of whether we're good or heavenly or caring or loving, by the knowledge or by the actions that we have. But to follow the Lord is represented more deeply by the woman. The woman represents our affections. She represents our love. She represents our heart. And is our heart dedicated to the Lord? And so the struggle that we face, the struggles that the disciples face, is that our intellect can easily rule over our love. We decide what is good. We decide what is loving. the intellect ruling over our love. Our life should be the opposite way around. It should be our love that rules our intellect. Our love determines the end and uses our intellect in order to get to that end. And so this is the core of the problem that the Lord is trying to highlight within our lives, is it's easy for our intellect to lead where it should be the love that leads. Love is meant to govern. I want to read to you from the teachings for the new church. You can follow along in your pew cards. We read from the book Secrets of Heaven, 1487. It's talking about what is the use of those things that we learn from the Lord's Word. The memory knowledge, or those things we have from the Word, which is acquired in childhood, is very numerous, but is arranged by the Lord in order that it may serve use. The first use that learning from the Lord's Word serves is so that we may think. Then, so that it may be used through thought, right? We may think more deeply about things, consider things, reason about things. And finally, so that it may be done. I want to stop there, pause there for a moment. The Lord's Word is meant to be done. What do we mean by doing of the Lord's Word? Is the doing of the Lord's Word a physical thing? Is obeying the Ten Commandments a physical thing? Or is there another way, a deeper way, a more important way that really matters of doing the Lord's work inwardly? And that's what the Lord is trying to draw our attention to. Because it goes on to say, so that finally, so that it may be done, namely that his very life may consist in use and be a life of uses. These are the memory knowledges which he absorbs in childhood. Without them, his external mind can never be conjoined with his internal mind, and at the same time be useful. The use of the Lord's truths, or the things that we learn from the Lord's Word, are there so that we can do them as to our very life. The Lord's truths are there to change our very life within us, the very life of our minds, the very life of our loves. That's the first doing of the Lord's Word, is within our minds. That is the first and most important doing of the Lord's Word. Because when we think about the actions that we do physically outwards, the question is, what is their quality? What is the quality within your actions? Anyone can do what appears to be good things. Anyone can do things that look helpful to others. But what is the quality within the things that we are doing? And that's what the Lord is drawing our attention to. The disciples, the doing of things outwardly, physically. But the Lord, being anointed, represents that inner worship and dedication to the Lord, and to bringing the qualities of heaven then into the things that we do. Because when we focus on doing things just outwardly, just getting into habits of doing helpful things, or helping the poor, or caring in outward ways, our focus can be in outward rewards. And we start to measure our spiritual life according to the outward things we do. That loses our focus on what's truly important. Love to the Lord is about shifting our focus away from trying to do things right and trying to do things in a loving, heavenly way, filled with the right qualities. So I want to read to you from Secrets of Heaven, 81. It says, there is nothing more important to a person than to know whether he has heaven within or hell. For he is going to live forever in one or the other. And to know this, it is necessary for him to know what good is and what evil is. For good constitutes heaven, and evil constitutes hell. It's important for us to know what is the quality within me. Because the quality in me is going to be the quality that fills all the actions that I have. If the quality within me is selfish, I can do outwardly good things, but the quality within them is selfish. I do it because I get some reward out of it. But if the quality in me is heavenly, then the things that I do are filled with heaven, are filled with love, and they are gifts freely given. So what is it to obey the Lord's word then? We can think of obeying the Lord's word as those physical actions. Well, I do not murder, I do not steal, I do not commit adultery, and we think in terms of physical actions. Is that obeying the Lord's word? Or is obeying the Lord's word taking the truths and using them within our minds? Not about a physical focus, but taking those and looking at our thoughts and our intentions. Consider, do not murder. I can, in my outward acts, not murder anyone. But I can be doing something helpful to a person, and inwardly in my mind, I can be murdering them. I can be thinking about all the bad things this person has done. Or I could be looking down on them from a place of feeling more important. We're not committing a sin outwardly, but we're committing it inwardly. If we think about stealing, we can be helping someone and giving of ourselves and caring for them, and while doing that, stealing things of reward. Oh, look at me, I'm a good person. Look at me, I'm meriting heaven. So we can be doing things and then stealing at the same time. So the outward things that we do aren't the focus of our spiritual work. Our focus of the spiritual work and obeying the Lord's commandments is something within our minds. Obeying the Lord's commandments happens within the quiet of your mind. Obeying the Lord's commandment happens in that secret place in your mind where no one knows, no one sees, no one has any idea of what's happening in your mind. There is where we practice being obedient to the Lord first. It is only then, when we're looking inwards into those secret places of our minds, do we then come to see, why am I so critical? Why am I so judgmental? Why do I think myself so important? Those things start to surface in us, and we see in the quiet of our minds how we aren't obeying the Lord's commandments. So the Lord wants to anoint us with oil. He wants to bring His goodness and His truth into our minds first and foremost, into those quiet places, into those secret places. That's where the Lord desires to bring His love and His truth. And so in the story, the Lord says, what this woman has done should be a memorial, should be remembered. And that's for us. To remember that life in this world even though it draws our attention outwards and we think that outward things and the actions are what's important, the Lord draws our attention inwards through the story to say, those things are not where the importance lies. The importance is inward, in the quiet places. Because if the Lord is in those quiet places, then the Lord is also in the things that we do. If there is heaven within, then there is also heaven in the things that we do. So as we go out into our weeks, into our days, pay attention to what's in our minds. And if we see an obstruction in our mind, in those quiet places, in those secret places, when we see something of ourself putting itself first instead of the Lord, then we can seek the Lord. Honestly look at ourselves and then work with the Lord to purify our minds so that we can receive more of that oil, more of His love, more of His wisdom into our minds, so that can fill not just the inside of our minds, but also all the actions of our life. Amen.